Good morning to the roundtable organized by the Renewable Heating and Cooling Platform and EHPA jointly. We will focus not only on heat pumps, but we'll take a broader perspective, and we will look at this broader perspective when it comes to the Irish situation. You know that energy policy is done in Brussels, and nobody can excuse themselves by saying that this came from Brussels, we didn't know about it. The member states are really contributing to all this work and the strategies and laws and regulations and directives that are coming out of Brussels with a fair share. But of course, it has to be implemented on the ground. And that's why we are very happy to talk about the Irish situation, the energy transition, system integration, etc. today. The first session will be handled by myself. I will moderate it, and I have with me Donna Gartland, who is the CEO of Codema, the energy agency of Dublin, which I think is probably a very exciting job. And she has a second hat, that is the CEO of the Irish District Heating Association. I guess both in combination should lead to a decarbonized Dublin quickly. Good morning, Donna. Then we have Seamus Hoyne with us, who is the chair of the board of directors of Tipperary Energy Agency. Tipperary Energy Agency is one of our masterminds when it comes to local energy transition. So I'm very happy to have him here. And he's also the head of development of the development unit in the Limerick Institute of Technology. And then we have with us for the first session, Mary Donelly, an old friend from Brussels times, who is now back to Ireland. She has been one of the most knowledgeable people I knew. You could ask her anything and she would answer to you as if she had a printed answer in front of her head without having any notes. So I was very impressed. I'm still impressed. Happy to see you here, Mary. And you're now the chairperson of the Renewable Energy Ireland, and you're also in the non-executive director of the Tipperary Energy Agency and E3G, both Tipperary Energy Agency we have heard, and E3G is a known consultancy in Europe. Good morning also to you, Mary. We will talk about in this first half hour about system integration, and I just want to give a few notes from my own perspective to that, because running the Heat Pump Industry Association, what I'm doing, and you can see that my name is Thomas Nowak. What I'm doing is actually proposing system integration for a long time. The heat pump system allows the integration and the conversion of electricity, ideally from a renewable source, into heat, and allows also the storage of this electricity in either a storage tank, which most heat pump systems have, or in the building core. And then, of course, we can also go to more fancy solutions where we use underground storage tanks, or where we use concrete structures in subway tunnels and similar. But so I would say that a heat pump is the system integration solution par excellence. Of course, there are some other ones, batteries, etc. But this combination of the Carnot cycle, a refrigerant cycle, plus a storage, plus a building, is what allows us to take energy from times of surplus supply, when the wind is blowing very hard, when the sun is shining a lot, and keep it in store for times, usually at night or at times with less wind, when we need it. The European Commission has recently proposed a strategy for energy systems integration, which is actually looking at this topic, and it's focusing mainly on this question of, if we have so much more wind and if we have so much more photovoltaic, what do we do with this electricity in times of surplus, and how do we provide services when electricity is not available in sufficient amounts? And I think this is what we want to talk about today. One important thing from a heat pump perspective is that in this strategy, the Commission forecasts or foresees the electrification of 40% of all residential buildings and 65% of all commercial buildings by 2030. Now, we as Heat Pump Industry Association, we said, okay, does that mean heat pumps? And we said, but if energy efficiency first prevails, then of course, electrification of heat means the implementation of heat pumps in many application areas. So it would be heat pumps. And if we do then a short back of the envelope calculation, we look at 120 million buildings, 40% residential, 65% commercial, means somewhere between 48 million and 60 million buildings that are provided with heat from heat pumps. Of course, also including district heating, of course, also including and adding to that industrial applications. So we have a very positive future. And with that, I would like to come back to my panel here, and I would like to ask you, and start with a small tour de table on this one, the question: what do you perceive system integration to be for you from your own perspective? What needs to be highlighted? Let's start with Mary and then go to Donna and Seamus.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas. I'm just unmuting there to get used to the system. System integration is basically looking at the energy system in its entirety and being able to bring together all of the services that we get from energy in an integrated way. And you know, you've no doubt heard me say this before. We get 3 services from energy. We get heating and cooling, of course. We get mobility and we get power. And today, especially in Ireland, we are at about 40-40-20 for heating, mobility and power. That's our current world, our current energy services world in Ireland. And over time, as we go towards decarbonisation, that's likely to shift to a much more balanced, perhaps 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 in our energy system. And it means that if we're going to be able to do that, we cannot compartmentalize the services we get from energy. So we cannot dissociate power from heat, heat from mobility, and mobility from power. They all interact with each other. And the key issue, and this would be particularly the case in Ireland, the key issue going forward in terms of decarbonisation is how do we manage to deal with the challenges of variable renewable energy, because this is much of the energy that we will use going forward. And one of the issues that we have there is how do you get the systems to marry one to another? For example, looking at the possibility of vehicle to grid for electric cars, feeding back into the system at times of shortage, looking at heat pumps, drawing down smart heat pumps, drawing their energy into buildings that are energy efficient and therefore able to store the energy, looking at how industrial uses such as data centers can integrate into the energy system through their waste heat, supporting, for example, district heating systems. So the system integration is much wider than the concept of the physical fuels and pipes that has tended to dominate our discussion on energy up until now. Rather, it's an integration from the perspective of the user, the consumer, the citizen, the industry, the company, as the case may be. How do they bring their services together in a holistic way so that we get maximum benefit from the possibilities that exist into the future? I have lots of other comments that I can make, but I'll wait for others to maybe answer your first question first, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Donna, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think we'll all probably echo each other a bit here, but yeah, I think there's, I suppose, some key components for me is like, yeah, I suppose system integration is really about an overall smart energy system. So as Mary said, like without looking at the 3 sectors and silos, it's all about integrating those 3 together and making the most of that. One important factor is efficiency. So when you look at all 3 sectors together, you're able to maximize resource efficiency. So using our fuels and technologies to their best abilities and getting the most from those. Cost efficiency, so how we get the most value from those renewable energy sources, from those fuels, and the synergies that we can get from those, from matching the 3 different sectors together. So looking at them individually, we can't tap into a lot of those synergies that are available. So we do need to, I suppose, get away from working in silos. Flexibility is a key outcome of system integration. So using the grids and storage that we have to provide flexibility, the flexibility required, as Mary says, to our renewable, to integrate more renewable electricity and match between the fluctuations on both the demand and the resource side. And a key outcome of designing smart energy systems and system integration is the future proofing it provides. So the ability to kind of survive market shocks, price price shots in different markets, and I suppose the ability to integrate new technologies and technological advances much more easily when we have an overall smart energy system. The challenges are not just legal challenges, but I'd say also very much institutional and organizational challenges. So, you know, the incumbents that are there will have to change, and business models will have to change. And I suppose that's a big challenge I see for this sector.
Good keywords. Seamus, from your perspective, also as a researcher, we have heard now, I think we agree on that, what system integration means, but what are the implications for research?
Well, I mean, there's lots of implications. I mean, if we think about it, let's start at the end user. You know, the person in the building. What does system integration mean to them? Like, they're going to have to change behavior, and we're going to have to research. The R&D sector is going to have to design systems that are seamless. So in my house, I have a heat pump, I have PV, I have about 6 different systems monitoring, providing me data, and I'm used to monitoring that and understanding it. But most people aren't like me. They're not geeks looking at 7 different apps, 20 different spreadsheets, doing regression analysis. They want to be comfortable, they want to be cool, they want to have heat, they want fresh air, they want their electric car to charge or their battery to charge. And the technology is not there yet, and the price point is not there yet that we can scale that. So researchers working with industry need to make that happen. I think the other piece really for me is around data. We are moving to a world where we're going to have vast quantities of data, but we're not using that. That's not information at the minute. And I think that particularly in the world of data management, data analysis, AI, we can have huge opportunities to provide really valuable, rich information to end users and to the system about how the system will work and be integrated. And so there's a huge field of research in that space. And then I think the technology providers, Donna touched on it, like we need a transformation in the systems. So we need package solutions that we can deliver to buildings, whether it's integrated with district heating or solar thermal or PV or all of these systems. We need to package solutions again, so that we're moving from a world where it's a very simple plug and play boiler to a much more complex world. And that people along the supply chain need to have confidence in the solutions we supply and not have to package everything themselves. So I think they're the kind of the big opportunities.
Well, let's hope that this simplicity can prevail eventually. If I imagine, Donna, that's probably not your job, but the control room of a district heating system has a lot of data. So if we zoom into that, you know, it's like Star Trek and Donna at the helm. Do you have enough data? And one thing that I wanted to see in that perspective is not the data of the operation of the existing system, but the question of, if you plan for a system like Dublin, and you say, okay, I have parts of the city that are energy dense, and there is a district heating system, and I have suburbs around it or areas in between. I have also clusters of high energy. How do you plan between, and now from my perspective, allow me, big heat pumps and district heating systems, and the areas where the smaller heat pumps or individual solutions can prevail? And we have one question here from the panel that I dare to introduce to that question too. Do you also integrate direct renewable heat sources, something like solar, or what Mary said, data centers for that matter?
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and remember all of that. Yeah. So I suppose when it comes down to a local level, then the synergies and the planning for these smart energy systems and system integration does rely a lot on data and data availability, but and that's why I suppose energy planning, evidence-based energy planning, really plays a key role when we try to actually roll this out on the ground. So I suppose building that evidence base up, as you say, Thomas, allows us to look at areas that have the high heat demand densities and those that don't, which obviously wouldn't support an economic rollout of district heating. So there is a role to play for, I suppose, in this kind of transition, there's roles to play for every technology and every fuel available out there, as long as it's low carbon. And obviously we're trying to prioritize what's the lowest carbon and what's the lowest cost. And what energy planning allows us to do is kind of zone then areas for where we see district heating rollout and where we would support, I suppose, individual building technologies or industry technologies. So that involves looking at both the demands. So obviously where the demands are the highest density for, say, heating, and then looking at what resources we have available. So things like you were saying there, like data center waste heat, for example. Why not use the waste heat through a large scale heat pump to again, as much higher efficiencies, than utilize, having rolling out individual heat pumps in that area. So that's where we want to, I suppose, try and tap into where we can get the most value from the resources that are available. And I suppose from a circular economy point of view, look to utilize all of the waste products and close the kind of loop on those. Particularly data centers have a big carbon footprint in the Dublin area, particularly because there's kind of a congregation around Dublin. So particularly looking to help to decarbonize those kind of industries. But there's a role to play for both individual and large scale heat pumps and other renewable technologies. We're looking at all types of renewable electricity or renewable energy sources. So geothermal as well has a role to play, and there's been a new strategy released for Ireland around geothermal district heating and where we can roll that out in Ireland. So yeah, there's lots of possibilities. It's just kind of getting the energy planning in place and the long-term planning in place, and getting the kind of local authorities on board to support those zones and those planning systems.
Well, thank you very much. And that brings me to Mary then, because I think from your experience in policy making and from your perspective now in Renewable Energy Ireland, what would be the necessary framework that governments can make, and are they taking the right steps to accelerate this energy transition towards a zero carbon emission solution?
Well, I think I think in terms of developing policy, we tend to look to government as the responsible party. But as you know yourself, I really do believe that development of policy should be a partnership between certainly the government sections, but also the industry and the consumers. And one of the things that I really think is very important in the context of Ireland is that at the moment, our programme for government and our climate action plan has a very ambitious rollout of heat pumps from now up to 2030. I mean, it's a 4- or 5-fold increase in the market. But and I think it's very exceptional that any industry sector is handed a market increase of that order by government policy. But in response to that, I think there really is quite a responsibility on the shoulders of the industry and those that are active in the industry. And for example, I would identify just 3. One is awareness. If you did walk down a street in Dublin and found people there today, which may not be the case, but in the normal circumstances, and you asked 10 people, what does a heat pump look like? I'm not sure that 1 or even 2 would know what to tell you. So the awareness, the actual awareness of what the physical entity looks like and how it operates is very, very low in Ireland. And when you consider the market increase that is proposed for a technology that people don't even know, I think the first challenge for the industry collectively is one of awareness raising. What is a heat pump? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And what does it do? The second issue, and maybe this will be taken care of as part of the broad European development, is the cost. Heat pumps are expensive. So when you talk to somebody about building a new house or a new apartment block or retrofitting, heat pumps are more expensive than fossil fuel boilers. And people tend to look at the initial capital cost. rather than the lifetime running cost of the system. So part of the process is to get this lifetime running cost awareness across, but also to get the cost down. And you said, what about the research? I think the research in that space is very important to really reduce the cost and to make it much more competitive and available and accessible to people. And then my third comment would be on skills. Heat pumps are, as Seamus said, they're not as simple as plug and play. They have to be installed correctly. They have to be maintained. They are a different way of running your heating system and your hot water system. So there is an element of obviously educating the consumer in terms of how to use it, but also the skill, the necessary skills to actually roll out heat pumps across the country. We have a situation where we've had a pandemic now. People have lost jobs. Some of those jobs won't come back. So we do have an opportunity to roll out the training systems to bring people into this industry. It is a growing industry. It is an assured job, I won't say for life, but certainly for the next number of years industry. And it is an opportunity now to bring people into the scheme. So when I think about policy, I think we have a headline policy, but that of itself won't deliver the results unless everybody in the system, in industry, and indeed ultimately consumers also collaborate in this process.
Thank you very much. You turned it around quite nicely from back to our responsibility, but we're happy to take it. I can actually positively reinforce what you said. We have looked at the documents, and it's not only in Ireland, it's also in Germany, it's in the UK, it's in other countries where the governments have understood that heat pumps will do them a lot of good, and where we really see in internal discussions also on the C-level that we say we have to take that very serious. It's not a gift that comes without an obligation. So there is work to be done on our own side. And I'm very happy to see that also Paul O'Donnell and Dan are listening here, and Siona, because I think you can touch on these questions also maybe in the second session a little bit. We will not open the floor for you now, because I want to ask Seamus, Tipperary Energy Agency. I have talked a lot to Paul Kenny when he was still at the helm, and he has always said that this offers simplification. Do you think that many Tipperary energy agencies would solve some of the issues that Mary has just addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, particularly if we look at the residential sector, people, if they're looking at a renovation project in particular, and they want to do energy efficiency first, which we all agree is critical, and then look at electrification of their heat, so a heat pump process, they need hand-holding through the process. So this one-stop shop concept, where ultimately we're selling that transition. That's our job, is to be that impartial salesperson that bring that building owner, that can be residential or non-residential, public or private. We bring them through that process, and we are the connection between, as one of our clients previously said, getting lost in Google and not knowing what to do, but actually having an impartial advice and support service that says, evidence-based decision making, this is what you can do, this is appropriate, this is the solution, we prove it works, we go to the market, who we know provides the right technology, and then we support them in delivering that transformation, that's the renovation of their building, or the design of a new building which has a smart low carbon heating and or cooling system. And that bridge between that awareness campaign, awareness is one piece of the jigsaw, but people can be aware of a lot of things but not take action. It's very easy to say tomorrow, the next week, or maybe next year when the kid goes to college, or you need to actually take them by the hand and walk them along the journey to make it happen. And unfortunately, not all citizens in Ireland or in Europe have access to that advice and that support. So it certainly will be part of the jigsaw, but it's, the saying, you can bring people to water, but you can't make them drink. there has to be, the policy has to be right, the technology has to be right, the advice has to be right, and they have to be able to invest. And I know you'll be talking about the finance challenge later on. And I think Mary touched on it. One of the challenges for energy agencies is having skilled, competent, knowledgeable contractors and SMEs in the sector that are able to deliver the projects at the end of the day. And that is a huge challenge across Europe, upskilling the construction workers, the engineers and designers to be able to deliver. The scale of transformation is, you know, it is a huge opportunity, but we need boots on the ground to be able to do it.
Can I add one question here from the audience, and I will just revise it. The question is, how can the industry make answer to Mary's question to make the product better understood and more known? I would reword it as saying, what can an energy agencies as yours do to do that? And please be brief because we have 4 more minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm an engineer. Lots of energy agencies have engineers. Energy agencies need to work better at communication and awareness and bring people in that have that expertise that can package those messages that will raise that awareness and keep it simple, clear messaging for the building owners that delivers them the information in a very clear and easy way. So I'm not the best person to do that because I'm a geek. No,
okay, then
I couldn't sell sand to the air.
From you and ask Donna, what about if you're in Dublin? If I'm not in Tipperary, I'm in Dublin now, and I want to renovate my house. What advice do I get from you?
I suppose we do actually have in-house communications and awareness teams, which have been, I suppose, instrumental in kind of changing the message from us engineers and the reports that we write, and they convert them into nice infographics and nice messages and nice videos. And we're working, I suppose, with a network now of sustainable energy communities. I suppose that's one of the first steps we're taking is to kind of bring that message to them, and hopefully they'll share. It's all like it's word of mouth as well. Once your neighbour gets the new car or the new windows in or the new doors, you go in. They're talking on the road saying, "Where'd you get that? How's that working out for you?" I suppose there was the word of mouth as well. And once we tap into those energy communities, we're hoping that will spread through Dublin.
Very good. So we have 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask to close this session with one question. I have heard from a behavioral scientist recently that what works really well is pledges. And we're talking system integration. So when it comes to system integration and your own pledge, what is your pledge for system integration for 2021? What will you do to make this concept useful for more renewable energy, for a decarbonized energy system in that very near future? Maybe we start with Seamus and then go to Donna and give Mary the closing.
Oh.
I can start to make it easier.
No. I have one pledge, which is to finish building my Arduino/Raspberry Pi system that will connect my 8-meter systems with my son and make my energy data public available so that people can see how my systems are all talking to each other.
Thank you. Donna.
Yeah, I suppose I'm going to say our pledge and not my pledge. Our pledge is to work with, I suppose, all the different everybody, all the different stakeholders, right down to citizens level, and get them involved in a long-term low carbon transition in Dublin, which will include system integration.
Thank you very much. And do you offer any do-it-yourself kits with Arduino style approaches for schools or students too, the one that Seamus was mentioning?
We don't, but I might ask Seamus to borrow his and see what we can do.
Maybe there's an opportunity because that will make things more visible. Mary, how about you? Portugal has about a balanced wind and photovoltaic system. So system integration in Portugal should be really easy, right? Do you still need a pledge there or back in Ireland? No.
You're quite right. In Portugal, there's lots of wind, lots of solar, and as a consequence, you can see in Portugal already that the electric car sales now represent 10% of new car sales, which I think must be one of the highest in Europe. In an Irish context, I'm looking forward to June of next year when the clean energy package transposes in Ireland, and when PV panels on residential roofs can sell their electricity into the grid. And for me, that's a very big empowerment of individuals and citizens in Ireland. And I hope to participate as a citizen in that exercise as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. So we see individual IT geekery, we see support from an association in making the things real, and we see becoming a prosumer as the Commission wanted everybody to become. Thank you very much, Seamus, Donna, and Mary. I think that was enlightening. I could have continued this, and I see from the chat window here that actually the other people are also regretting our very short time slot that we gave to this, but I can assure you it's going to be better and it's going to become even more interesting over the morning. So I hand over to Dan, who will introduce the next speakers and continue the day. Thank you very much and have a nice morning.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And indeed, that was quite amazing, especially the pledges. So thank you so much for each and everyone for taking, well, every little step helps, right? To continue with what Thomas has said, the third session actually, so the last half an hour will be devoted for questions and answers. So you'll have the time to raise your question and we will go through the chat. As always, your questions are very much appreciated, as well as your positive and active participation. So to go into the second session, and by the way, my name is Dan Stefanica, I'm the head of projects here at EHPA. And we want to give a bit of information about our RHC, this project that you see next to EHPA. And what is RHC? Well, the RHC platform, and by the way, you can scan the little code on the screen that you have with your phone, and it'll take you to the website directly, or just Google it, of course. Is a European technology and innovation platform, so an ETIP since 2016. This means it showcases the renewable energy technologies for heating and cooling, and why are they safe, why are they clean, why are they efficient, why are they increasingly cost effective. Moreover, as a result of us showcasing these advantages of them, we also showcase how society will benefit, how the increasing contribution of renewable heating and cooling to the European Union's energy mix can also lead to other, let's say, added benefits, as was touched upon in the first session, such as better skills, improved air quality, improved technologies in all sorts of sectors, innovation, development, taking steps in the policy arena, giving funding to innovative pilot projects, and so on. So what are the goals of RHC? Well, to put it very shortly, is to develop working relationships with other relevant national and regional platforms. So this is quite a particular project, let's say. It aims to establish as well a strategic research and innovation agenda, and actually several strategic and innovation agendas, because the project has different technology panels and different horizontal working groups. For example, EHPA will develop a strategic research and innovation agenda focusing on the heat pump sector. RHC also means to identify priorities of cross-cutting natures, so exactly like the ones we talked about: education and training, socioeconomic aspects, international cooperation, as well as, of course, identify the barriers and the gaps that are still existing in research, in innovation, but also softer areas such as regulation, financing, and so on. So this is what RHC is, very shortly. Again, I encourage you to just check it out. But more importantly, rather than just going to the website, checking what's happening there, it's also nice to say that there are many opportunities for you, the relevant attendee, because if you're attending this workshop, you probably have quite an interest in the technologies, in meeting other experts. So you can actually become a member or an expert of the different working groups, of the different technology panels. There are many events such as this one focusing on Ireland, but EHPA will organize one focusing on Portugal. Our partners organize other events focusing on other particular countries, as well as other events focusing on the different technologies themselves. So you can always participate to these events. You can benefit from the documents that we are working on that have been already drafted after a long and arduous work with a lot of inputs from policymakers, experts, and they are freely available on the website. You can even benefit from a project database that is really easy to play with and to find the relevant information. And it focuses on projects with, of course, renewable heating and cooling that are EU-funded initiatives. With that being said, and again, strongly encourage you to see if you can contribute to this project. We very much look forward to collaborating and continuing and growing our community that we have. I want to introduce the speakers that we have today for the second session. So starting in no particular order, we have Siona Daly, Acting Chief Executive Officer at Tipperary Energy Agency. Siona is a chartered mechanical engineer and a certified energy manager. Her main areas of expertise are in local authority and public sector energy management. She has extensive experience in energy engineering in projects related to HVAC, automation, building management systems, mechanical services projects, lighting projects, and much more. She is also a registered energy auditor with SEAI. If you don't know what that means, although this is a workshop covering Ireland, that is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So thank you so much, Siona, for joining us today. The next speaker is Padraic O'Reilly. He's actually the chair of the Heat Pump Technology Panel of the RHC platform. So we are very much grateful for his participation in this. Padraic is a mechanical engineer. He's working in the areas of renewable heating and building services since 2002, with a particular emphasis on the design and installation of heat pump systems. Prior to that, he worked in heating-related manufacturing businesses. He joined the LIT Development Unit in September 2017 to work on the Superhomes 2.0 project, and is continuing now to work on our shared project called Superhomes 2030 that we will touch upon a bit later. Thank you so much, Padraic, for joining us today. Our next speaker is Laura Heuston. She is the director and co-founder at Sustainability Works Ireland. The Sustainability Works, in her words, is a boutique sustainability consulting firm that offers a unique blend of skills and experience across sustainability, strategy, finance, policy, and communication. Laura has over 20 years professional experience across industry and practice, specializing in working with corporations, asset managers in renewable energy, and energy efficiency finance. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today. Lastly, we have Paul O'Donnell, Managing Director of Unipipe Ireland, originally a heating installer and starting his own business all the way back in 1983. Paul has been working with heat pumps since first installing a ground source heat pump in 1985. By the way, that is before I was even born. Probably the first one fitted in Ireland. In 1997, Paul started Unipipe Ireland to focus on the design and supply of German manufactured floor heating systems and renewable heat sources. In addition to being the manager director of Unipipe, Paul is also a director and founder of the Irish Heat Pump Association. So thank you so much for joining us, Paul, today. And if you see me, by the way, looking at on the other side, that's just because I have a bigger screen there. So This session is actually, of course, focusing on research and innovation of the renewable heating and cooling platform, but it's also a continuation of the first session, because all the speakers have experienced probably the same problems, they have the same ideas of what is needed in terms of innovation, what is needed in terms of research, and also hands-on, hands-on knowledge of the work being done in Ireland. So to start, I would just start with Siona and ask, just to continue from what Seamus said, I know the Tipperary Energy Agency has a long track record of driving the energy transition by providing expertise and of innovation and strong customer service. What would you say are the innovations that are really needed and that Tipperary Energy Agency is providing?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dan. So just to put it into context, since 2017, the Tipperary Energy Agency has installed 300 heat pumps in residential buildings and 45 heat pumps in non-residential buildings. And we've also looked at biomass in the past, and we've installed 3 biomass boilers in 2011 and 2012 in leisure centres in 3 leisure centres across Tipperary. We're currently in the process of designing a kind of a hybrid heating system, which involves both biomass and geothermal heating in a leisure centre in County Clare. And basically this was designed using the non-domestic BER software tool to kind of sell it to the client, and we were selling the point that we were going to bring a building up from a D-rated to an A-rated leisure centre, which is quite difficult. Just to give you, it's already been tendered. It's that kind of tweaking of design at the moment, and it should be all kind of installed by March. But realistically, what we know is one of the issues is that when you're putting in a heat pump, whether it's in a house or a commercial building or even this leisure centre, the associated works to bring down your heat load and energy efficiency is extremely expensive. And just to put that into context, for this leisure centre, the total cost of the project is close to €4 million. So that's significant. And that's what it costed to do a deep retrofit to bring a building up from a D to an A. So that's not something that can really be just pocket change or in someone's annual budget. So that's one of the issues. I guess the other thing that I have experienced personally, and I think we kind of forget about it in Ireland, is the need for cooling. And for example, I live in a newly built house, 3 years old, and it is built with passive solar design and a lot of south-facing glazing. And the one, I knew it was going to overheat from the modelling I did, but I was thinking, oh, sure, that could be lovely. I kind of grew up in a cold house, so I thought overheating would be great, but actually it's not great in summertime. It overheats. So one technology that I think we're sort of leaving out a lot is air-to-air heat pumps and the ability to maybe cool houses. And when you have apartments and when you have small enough houses with small rooms, why aren't we doing air-to-air as an option instead of, not instead of, but perhaps that's another heat pump technology that could really work. And I don't think it's part of the residential makeup of technologies currently in Ireland, or even considered really in Ireland. Padraic might know differently, or Paul, sorry. The other thing I would say is what I have found is that, like I said, with the leisure centre, your commercial buildings, it's straightforward enough for us. A lot of our non-residential buildings have been sort of smaller buildings like libraries, community halls, GAA clubs, you know, when you get to a point where you're looking at your larger buildings, especially buildings that are on the gas grid in the likes of cities, where you're going to have to change out all your radiators to you know, low temperature radiators, the cost is just going to be massive. So I think that's something worth discussing within the panel in terms of you know, how realistically these larger consumers or larger buildings are going to be able to retrofit into renewable heating. The other then question just around, I guess the other kind of thing to consider that we're struggling with is how to heat listed buildings and buildings that really you can't bring the fabric down into the low kind of heat levels that you need to warrant heat pumps and stuff. In terms of research, then I think what we really need to look at is a renewable heating solution for listed buildings. We also need to look at kind of hybrid solutions, maybe using like VRF systems, air to air, that will supplement. Maybe, you know, we may not be able to completely get rid of fossil fuels in some buildings, but we could, you know, have a top up of renewable system. And I think that is in a lot of commercial buildings in Dublin anyway. You'd see a lot of air handling units bringing in tempered air, and then you have a VRF system at play. And then just again, it's maybe for Paul, a question, and it's really around the technologies. Like, is there any way of boosting the temperature of a, you know, I know there's high temperature output heat pumps around 60 degrees at the moment, but is there any way of getting an extra 10 degrees or 15 degrees coming down the line?
I'm muted here. Yeah, what we do a lot is integrate heat pumps with boilers, so the boilers are controlled actually by the heat pump. We don't try and make the heat pump go to 65 or whatever. If you run the heat pumps up at a high temperature, they last very short periods of life, and that'll have everybody unhappy. But often a block to this is that, as you touch on things like BER, and you know, the assessor might say, oh, if it doesn't cover 100% of the load, it's not allowed. So although I'm finding most of our sales are non-grant related now. People just see the grant as being so much of a nuisance. They want the technology anyway. In some of those bigger houses, the listed buildings you've talked about, we've heated lots of those castles and things like that. The biggest one I did was around 40,000 square feet or 4,000 square meters. And that was just the actual original floors were removed and put back over floor heating. And, you know, it was still running at a low temperature. The people were very pleased. But if they had gone with that project to some of the other people, they would want everything covered 100% by the heat pumps. And as you say, you can take a huge base load off. But the other problem is in cities, when you have big buildings, I remember a courthouse was shown to me in Cork, and they wanted to use ground source heat pumps in it. But the first thing is they just didn't have enough room to drill. It was impossible, in fact. And then, you know, very, very large air to water heat pumps can be hard to source or position.
When you say the castle, so you kind of have a combination of fossil fuel and the likes of a heat pump supplying, is it? Or
yeah. If we have a large country house and it has a single phase electric supply, what we might be able to do is put in one or perhaps two single phase heat pumps in a cascade, perhaps with an existing oil or gas boiler. Actually, my own house here is an example. It's maybe 350 square meters, and I couldn't get a three-phase electric supply here 20-something years ago. However, my old oil boiler is wired into the heat pump. I don't have to control anything or think about anything. When the weather starts to cool, the heating system comes on. And I looked into my oil tank yesterday. I have about a half a tank of oil after 6 or 7 years. So it's a 10-yearly event to get a top up of oil to just cover peak loads. But if I was to present this house as I live in it to, say, get a BER grant or whatever, they wouldn't like it. They'd say, oh, that's not allowed. So I think it's overarching rules and regulations are slowing everything down.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you so much, Siona. Regulations, yes, one part, of course, that we always talk about. Another very important one is funding. More important would be financing. So going to Laura and coming back from the first session and what Siona said about the necessary financial resources that you need to do these types of renovations, I would ask, what are the challenges coming from the finance providers when developing their strategies around retrofit finance?
Thanks, Dan. So I guess my area of research is on residential retrofit finance, so specifically for owner occupiers who are in the able to pay segment. So I guess I've been looking at this over the past few months, and we're due to publish a report in the next week or two. And really, there's a recognition that obviously, and this was touched on in the first panel, that finance isn't the only problem for homeowners in terms of deciding to undertake a retrofit project. They need someone to hold their hand, they need a trusted advisor, there's many other things they need. But in an Irish context, it is often cited as a key barrier to actually undertaking a project or to doing and putting in all the measures that they could put in. So I suppose it is a key challenge to overcome. And I guess what we've done is we've looked at, what has worked well in other countries in terms of a finance offering that will encourage homeowners to invest. Because if you look at it in an Irish context, we've said we need to get 500,000 homes to a B2, so to a very good BER rating standard, and we need to install 400,000 heat pumps. And public finances just cannot finance that on their own. It needs hundreds of thousands of homeowners to make decisions to either use their own savings or to take out loans to invest in their homes and do these retrofits. So what we've done is really not reinvent the wheel. Let's look around the world and see what has worked well elsewhere. And there's a couple of countries that I'd look to that have done this well from the homeowner finance perspective, in particularly Germany, France, and the Netherlands. I'm sure everyone knows the German KfW example. But really what those countries have done is they've really tried to marry a couple of things in relation to a finance solution for homeowners. So the first thing is that they've developed lower cost and longer term debt available for home retrofits than is available in the current market. And we'll come back to how they've done that. So it's basically below cost, below market interest rates and below market terms in terms of the length of the loans. They've also ensured that there are mortgage and personal loan options there, so both secured and unsecured loan options for homeowners, just to give flexibility and optionality to homeowners. And it'll depend on the size of a product as to whether the size of a project as to whether a homeowner might want to take out a mortgage or just take a personal loan. In all of the successful countries, commercial finance providers have a key role. So like, as I said, in an Irish context, and obviously it's much bigger numbers in other countries such as Germany, but this involves hundreds of thousands of small loans to homeowners. And the only finance providers that can deal with that are commercial finance providers who can handle high volume and low enough quantum, between 20 or 60K probably per homeowner, and that they can handle that from a credit risk assessment, just from a plain processing perspective. So you really need your commercial finance providers in there. And those finance providers need to partner with the one-stop shops like Seamus was referring to earlier. So you have to have your technical and your finance solution integrated so that it's just as easy as possible. Like, what we want to do is remove as many barriers as possible to deter that might impede homeowners from actually undertaking a project. And the last point is that these finance solutions or finance offers are still underpinned by grants and grants and also energy efficiency obligations scheme contributions from large energy suppliers if they're there. So really, those are kind of the key elements that we've seen in other countries working. And in Germany and the Netherlands and France, the interest rate on the loans would be in the range from 0 to 4%. So very low for personal loan rates compared to standard rates. So in Ireland, if you think about it, a 10-year loan would currently cost you 8 or 9%. And so except for one product which is aimed at green retrofits, which is now sub 5% for 10 years. But you know, when you look at the other countries, they're really getting down to those really low 0 to 4% rates. How did they achieve those rates? So the challenges for commercial finance providers who have to play this key role is they just can't do those below market rates. Like, they want to do right, but they also have to be profitable and sustainably profitable if we want this to work. So how did those other countries achieve those low rates? It was through putting public funds to work, and particularly in the form of credit risk enhancements or
I think Laura's internet is a bit slow. So just to let Laura's internet recover, to move a bit to Patrick, and we were talking about one-stop shops and
has my sound gone?
Yes, the internet is very slow, Laura. Yours, I hope. So to talk a little bit about a one-stop shop, Patrick, you were working on Superhomes 2.0. We're now working together on Superhomes 2030. Can you tell us a little bit about the approaches that these projects take and why they consider the one-stop shop solution to be so important?
Yes, thanks, Dan. Certainly, I suppose the work that we're doing in the development unit in LIT is in support of the work of Tipperary Energy Agency in some respects. I suppose we're very much looking at researching technologies and applications that are really ready to make an impact. You know, so when we talk about the targets for heat pumps for Ireland, for example, from the Climate Action Plan, I think is a total of 600,000 by 2030, 400,000 from retrofits. So they're huge numbers coming from where we're coming from now. So the one-stop shop had piloted a process, I suppose, in going back to maybe 2014, 2015, where whatever grants were available were bundled together, and then the team of people was put together to, as Seamus said earlier, to hold the hand of the homeowner, to bring them through that journey, to give them the right advice, to steer them away from things that they shouldn't do and to steer them towards things that they should do, provide finance options for them. As has been mentioned, the grants were a key part of this, and how far that goes into the future, we're not sure. We focused then very much on the technical side of it. So when we were, I suppose there was a lot of foresight during those initial pilots where monitoring systems were installed on a lot of heat pump systems, you know, in the order of maybe 20 to 50 systems overall. We took 20 of those systems and we looked at really detailed performance data, and it told us an awful lot about what had happened during the process. So we saw it was a kind of a window into the one-stop shop process. It showed us where, you know, once you control a design process and you have quality control measures within the organization, you can achieve very good results in terms of the design being done properly and implemented well. You then have the challenges of implementing that out in the field. So you're talking about selection of equipment, installers, the coordination of the different trades. You know, you have the builder, the mechanical / plumber. In some cases, you have to bring a refrigeration engineer, an F-gas certified engineer, excuse me. And then, you know, very importantly, you have the control side of things, the electrical and control. So you have the power side of it, and you have the understanding of the overall control system. And you put all of that together then, and it has to be commissioned. It has to be commissioned in a way that suits the homeowner. And then it has to be communicated to the homeowner so that the homeowner knows what's going on, and that they can intervene to some extent. So we found lots of different little snippets of stories where homeowners were afraid to touch them. You know, they maybe got the feeling that they weren't supposed to go near controls. other homeowners were much more willing to roll up their sleeves and get into that type of thing, you know. So commissioning settings was another area that we found to be very critical, you know, that maybe you might be over optimistic in trying to achieve really good COPs, but it can have negative effects on other aspects of performance, which can lead to things like compressor cycling and so on, which can affect the overall efficiency for the year. So that ultimately there's a risk in that scenario that the house doesn't perform as predicted. So I think that one of the key things to take from all of this is the continuing need to focus on the design process, that we can't take our eye off that for 1 second. At the moment, when you step away from the one-stop shop, how is that being handled? It's been handled by, you know, the sellers of the heat pumps are providing that service to some extent, to you know, to a greater or lesser extent. In some cases, then it's more back on the installer, and you do hear kind of questions among the, you know, in conversations within the Irish Heat Pump Association and in these types of forums where there are questions about who should be sizing the radiators for a heat pump system, you know, and stuff like this. So that's where we have a cohort of people who know how to do that. But when you put that in the context of the overall numbers that need to be installed over the coming years, it's a small percentage compared to what it needs to be. So I think the big focus needs to be on getting designers, installers, commissioning engineers in much, much bigger numbers. I think that you know, I've experienced myself of, you know, the lack of commissioning engineers with really, you know, good knowledge of what to do. They are there, but there are not enough of them there. So I think that would be the continuation of the one-stop shop, I think, is important, but then it needs to be supported by more boots on the ground, I suppose.
Thanks so much, Patrick. With that being said, we will go in, and sorry for being 2 minutes over schedule. We will just invite the speakers from the first session, as well as Thomas back, and we'll go into a Q&A. We've been receiving a lot of questions actually via our chat, but I would like to ask one just to get the discussion started, and that would be, I'll just start with Seamus, if that's okay. Would just be what countries would Ireland look for? Laura had given some examples about Germany, for example, and their financing. But if you were to have some aspects from another country so that Ireland can take and put on its either policy or financing, what country would that be, and what would these let's say well done points go to?
Okay, thanks. So I suppose one of the countries that we work a lot with in LIT in particular is Austria. I mean, they have, for me, I suppose, one of the Upper Austrian Energy Agency is one of the agencies that we work with in particular through LIT and the Energy Agency, and Christiana Egger there talks about the carrot, the stick and the tambourine. You know, the stick being the policy and the legislation, the regulations that are put in place that have driven the decarbonisation of their energy system. The carrot being the relative supports, the one-stop shops, the advice, the information and the incentives. And then the tambourine, and that a really, really strong awareness campaign, which brings the end users along. And, you know, that region of Austria now has, their campaign is Goodbye Oil. So their campaign is basically to remove oil boilers out of buildings. Replacing them with heat pumps, and biomass is very strong in that part of the world also. But you know, they've put really good structures in place for the types of heat pumps and the performance of those heat pumps, whether it's the global warming potential of the refrigerants, the noise, etc. So trying to eliminate the problems before they begin. So certainly, and we have a project started now called Heat Pumps for All, which you obviously know about, Dan and Thomas, which is looking at these things about the end user, the skill side and the supply side, and the education supplied, so that we can try and connect the pieces together. So yeah, that's one of the areas where I look for inspiration and try and inform our policymakers about what we might do.
Thank you, Seamus. I remember we did a little bit of testing of the platforms to kind of eliminate any gremlins, although they show up all the time. And I remember talking to Paul during his test, and he was telling me about Norway and the example of Norway of ease of installation. So would that be, Paul, the example you would like to say to Ireland? Could you look at Norway and maybe do the things like they do it?
That would be very nice. I believe the sales of heat pumps in Norway there's incredible penetration there, but they have a very different approach. It's very simple. You just simply send a receipt into the government having bought a heat pump. Whereas we have complicated the process so much that I would say that perhaps 3 out of 4 of our sales or more are people, when they hear what they have to go through to get the grant, they just go, look, I couldn't be bothered. I want the machine anyway. So it's, I suppose, nice to see in one way that they still buy a heat pump. Others it's very hard for us as suppliers to find installers who want to get involved as well. As soon as I ring around some of our installers and say, look, this guy wants a grant, I mean, 3 or 4 of them just don't want to know about it anymore. They've enough work anyway, and there maybe some of them are people who've done nothing but fit heat pumps for the last 15 plus years, and they're being told they have to go to heat pump school and all sorts of things. So they just decide it's just too much of a pain in the ass for them. So they, and I'm sure the grant figures are distorted by that behavior here, but they just seem to have made it much more simple in Norway. And, you know, there are ordinary things in the market will sort out things. If you do something wrong, it doesn't see that it has to be all on the responsibility of the authority or SEAI or whoever. I mean, if a guy does a bad thing with a heat pump in a house, I mean, normal market things like he can be sued by the house owner for doing a bad job, just like he fitted a gas boiler or an oil boiler badly. But we've got a lot of regulation coming down and all this and complication. So yes, I'd love Norway.
Okay, so take a note, next national roundtable, Norway, after they join the union. To talk a little bit about more about what you touched upon about taxes and grants, and hopefully Laura's internet is back. I was wondering about the EU sustainable finance, the taxonomy, and the availability of low-cost retrofit finance in that.
Yeah, I think, can I be heard okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I might turn off my video, sorry, just in case it goes again. But yeah, I think so the purpose of the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy is to define what is green. And really it's to help, I suppose, the financial sector who aren't experts in heat pumps or anything else, or home retrofits, or what a new green building is, or energy performance standards. It's literally to give them a rule set on what is green. And the rationale for that is that policymakers want to steer capital. They want investors and lenders to lend and invest in green rather than any other color of underlying company or project or innovation. And by giving this rule set, they're then going to develop basically a whole set of other standards and labels defining what is a green finance product. And I suppose to cut a long story short, what it will mean is that there'll be cheaper capital available for green. So cheaper capital available for home retrofits, whether it's in the form of loans or any other form, you know, and it's because investors and lenders are thinking about the impact of in particular climate risk on their portfolios. And so they want to basically green their investment portfolios. They want more green underlying investments, and therefore the demand for those underlying investment goes up and the cost of capital for those underlying investments go down. So I think the EU sustainable finance could have a taxonomy along with the Green Deal and the policy direction that's giving in terms of the real economy policy direction. I think of all of these things coming together should result in more capital available for retrofit and renovation projects at a lower cost.
Thank you so much.
Dan,
yes, please.
Can I quickly come into this? Because that's a very important point. And it's important because there is work for all these actors from Ireland to be done. There is huge amounts of money, 1.8 trillion euros over 7 or some more years. But this money will not flow the direction Ireland if nobody lobbies the government to present their national rescue and recovery plans. And these are due in the first quarter of 2021. So really, you need to use all the connections you have versus the government to say, we need some of this money to come to Ireland for single-stop shops, for energy agencies, for consulting projects, and actually, yes, also for making application simpler. And I fully chime into what Paul just said. The Norwegians, if you want to set up a subsidy scheme, go and check the Norwegian approach first. And then if you have anything else to make it more complicated, think twice.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And you can jump in anytime. Just continuing with that and moving to Donna. So again, we talked about countries that you may look, Norway is doing such a good job. What would be the examples that you have in mind? What would be the countries and what are they doing right? And what can Ireland get from them, for example?
Yeah, I suppose the countries that we're looking to, and then in terms of, say, large-scale heat pump integration into district heating systems, would be, again, we have to go to Scandinavia, would be like Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and who have had, I suppose, district heating systems in place for a long time. So they're moving towards what's called 4th generation or 5th generation district heating, where we look at they're looking at system integration and the rollout of large scale heat pumps as a key part of that, in combination with large scale thermal storage. So you kind of get that scale of demand response and system integration. So yeah, those guys, but the problem is, I suppose they've been doing it for such a long time that it's hard for us to learn. Even, you know, we don't have a DeLorean, unfortunately, that we can go back 30, 40 years in, and until there's a gas crisis here that will mock the oil crisis of the 1970s, that kind of kicked the Scandinavians into changing their systems. You know, we can't, there's a lot we can learn in terms of technologies, but in terms of how we get there, we're looking to work with kind of more similar markets in Northwest Europe, which would have low concentration or low penetration of district heating in their heating systems at the moment. So the Netherlands in particular, and their, I suppose, approach to moving away from gas, which is, I suppose, an interesting one from a country like the Netherlands, who have had a tradition of gas production. So we're trying to see how they've been moving away from using gas to district heating and integrating, I suppose, renewables at large scale there, and kind of trying to support each other and learn from each other through that process.
Thanks so much, Donna. I would ask the same question to Marie, because, well, she has a lot of experience. She worked here in Brussels. What would be the countries that you see as an example for Ireland to take into account, and why exactly is this the case?
Well, in addition to what Donna was saying, there's one or two other countries that have an interesting history or experience that I think we should learn from. One is France. And as you know, in France, heating is largely electric, although historically it has been resistance space heating, because electricity has been cheap coming from their nuclear power stations. But in France, about 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, they brought in heat pumps with grants. But unfortunately, there wasn't really a control of the standard or the quality of the heat pumps, and many of them failed. And as a consequence, they tended to get a bad reputation. And the rollout of heat pumps in France has been seriously damaged by that, because the memory in the population still exists about that bad experience. So I think one of the lessons out of that for Ireland is that when we roll out a new technology, which heat pumps are for the Irish context, we do have to be very conscious of the quality and that the product actually delivers the performance that we're saying. A second member state where we can learn, and it's already been mentioned, but certainly when we were doing the analysis, it was surprising how high a share of heating in Germany comes from oil. Virtually all standalone houses in Germany are heated by oil, and it comes to quite a large number in actual fact. On the scale of things, it's small in German context, but it's a very large number of houses. They're privately owned, and it's a serious challenge for them also to get people out of oil boilers in their privately owned homes. And in that context, that's very analogous to the situation that we have here in Ireland. So for me, looking both at France and Germany, I think it's an important experience that we can gain from. And then I think we do need to look to the colleagues in the Eastern European countries who have years and years and years of experience with district heating systems, and how they've used it, how they've used waste heat from industry, how they've used local resources, to say in terms of biomass, how they've delivered it into their communities and been very successful in it. And I think that's also a real experience that we can benefit from here in Ireland.
Thanks so much, Marie. To put it the other way, Ireland can learn from other countries, of course, all have good parts, bad parts. And this is a question for Siona. What does Tipperary is a very good example of what something in Ireland is going very well, a very good initiative. So what other things can other countries learn from Ireland?
Well, I think with the Tipperary Energy Agency and our approach, like as Seamus alluded to, we would have a dedicated team, and they're kind of called super homes. So, I guess there is a customer journey, and there's the engagement with the customer at the start. There's the bringing them through. There's the customers shouldn't, in my opinion, be left to. They should be given independent advice. There should be an element of design and checking that the house is, insulated well enough that, that it's going to be able to accommodate a low temperature, heat source. So that's something that we do that, from the customer initial kind of contact through. We don't have a financing aspect to the Tipperary Energy Agency at the moment. That's probably the one missing thing. But again, I think it's similar kind of, and I know you talked about Norway and you only had to issue a receipt to get your grant. And realistically, I think if that was the case in Ireland, I think there'd be a huge amount of heat pumps going into unsuitable houses. And like Marie mentioned, it could actually be a hinder to the long-term success of heat pump rollout in Ireland. So I think right now the grant system is very complicated, but I think there's a way of simplifying it, yet still maybe having a sign-off by someone professional that knows what they're looking for in the process. So I think, I would love to see more trees, even more energy agencies in Ireland copying what we're doing, really kind of make sure that the heat pump going in the right application and the customer is kind of being brought along the journey, that it doesn't become so attractive by incentives that you're left with people kind of skip that step, and then heat pumps are just fired into every house in Ireland without the thought and the technical advice.
Thank you so much, Siona. To continue with Paul and discuss this customer journey, because you have the first-hand experience, what is your your view of this customer experience of what Siona just mentioned?
I suppose I've been selling heat pumps a long time, long before there was any grants for them, but we always viewed it, because the other fuels were so expensive, that the heat pump, if we could show that it would be a self-financing journey to the customer, that if he got rid of his oil boiler and went from a position of spending maybe 2,000 or 3,000 euros a year to 1,000 euros a year, it's obviously very attractive to them. And we were always able to show, given it that the house was big enough, if sometimes very small houses, this of course doesn't work. You're not going to spend 10 or 15,000 euros working on a house where your energy bill is 800 quid a year on gas. So, the bigger homes, and still to this day, we sell a lot of heat pumps to large homes, and they're not always very well insulated homes. There's this myth out there that you have to have a super insulated home for a heat pump. I agree, you should have, but sometimes that's not possible. It can be a period house or a castle. And in a very simplistic way, if they've been running their heating system in short bursts with, you know, a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the evening, and we introduce a heat pump to most of those buildings and leave it running, connected to, say, weather compensation, we've always found that the buildings heat very well and the people are very pleased, because, you know, those old buildings, they were also spending a lot of money on oil. And if we're now bringing them something that's costing a lot less money, it has always been very well received. But we spend a lot of time giving our customers design advice and advice on heating and on cooling as well. We've new systems in. We actually now, funnily enough, have a heating system that makes more than it uses. So that was always a holy grail. I see that coming on the market. If you Google triple solar in Holland, it's a very interesting system. They're ground source heat pumps connected to liquid filled solar panels. So there's still plenty of interesting new stuff in the market that I get a buzz about. We see heat pumps now have, or our heat pumps now have weather forecasting built into them, which is very good. If the heat pump sees it's going to be a mild day the following day, it slows production of energy down and saves money, or conversely can see a cold snap coming. So there's many nice new things coming in heat pumps, but often we get new innovations then that we've so many overarching regulations and everything that you can't fit this into a grant atmosphere, or but people, I find, will still buy it anyway if the thing is good enough to stand up on its own. But I know more than anybody else want to see heat pumps being slung into houses badly. It is the bane of my life. There's about 3,200 plumbers in Ireland. And somebody was joking one day and he said, yeah, there's 50 good ones, you know. So we all had a bit of a laugh about that. But they're coming round rapidly, I think. But we've also had a period of a financial crash and no apprentices for 10 years. So there's all these things, gaps in knowledge and so on.
Thank you so much, Paul. We're nearing the end of the online session itself. So I would ask each of you, including Thomas, of course, what would be the, let's say, 3 things, let's say 5 things that should change in the next years for the mass deployment of heat pumps and renewable heating and cooling energies in general. So we'll start with Donna, just your let's say 3 to 5 wishes that you would like to see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I suppose I've been working on this list for Mary for another reason as well, so I have them in the front of my head. So I suppose I'll be taking a district heating stroke large scale heat pump point of view here. But I suppose the infrastructure needed to roll out district heating at scale needs to be seen as a public infrastructure project, in the same way we roll out roads and electricity grids and gas grids. And it needs to be recognised as a public infrastructure that is required for the transition over the next 10 years. We would also like to see that there's a long-term planning, I suppose, so past the political schedule of 3 or 4 years or whatever, you know, like we want to see long-term planning. If we are to plan for 2030 and 2050, we'd like to see like a long-term heat plan for Ireland. And then the last thing is to support the customer at the end, so to support communities, cooperatives and citizens to be more engaged in the heating transition. And as Paul has said, maybe simplify the granting system, and that, particularly in the Irish context, would also would really help to kind of, I suppose, scale up and get us where we need to be by 2030.
Thank you, Donna. What about you, Thomas? Because we talk a lot about deployment, mass deployment lately at the EHPA.
Well, I have my 3 wishes, and they echo what Laura said. I am convinced that we will not finance this energy transition by public funds. No government, not even these 1.8 trillion euros that Europe has put together now, and that of course also rely quite a bit on activation of private investors. No government has enough money to pay for this. And before I give my wishes, I also want to stress that I think the perception that heat pumps are expensive is a bit wrong, because at the moment the comparison solution is a fossil fuel boiler, and this is perceived as cheap, but it's only perceived as cheap because society generously pays for the external effects of fossil combustion. If we would put these 2 things on a level playing field, the heat pump would be at least on par, maybe even cheaper, for sure, over the life cycle. So that brings me to my 3 wishes. Number 1, internalization of external effects. If we have a CO2 price of somewhere starting at 60 maybe, but we all know it's not enough. Research says 105, 110, maybe even 600 is more appropriate. If you put this onto the bill of a gas boiler, of an oil boiler, the discussion is over. No end user will buy that product because it's just too expensive for himself as a responsible person in society. That of course leaves then energy poverty, and we need to look at social policy to avoid energy poverty, because that shouldn't be the result. The people that can't afford heating today shouldn't be punished even more because they want to do something good for the environment. Second one, electricity taxation. Operation costs of heat pumps are artificially expensive in more than half of Europe's countries, simply as a result of government policy. It's not God-given. It is decided that electricity is taxed more than oil and gas. So it's like you punish the best student in class. And the third, but that's that's something I find probably more interesting from the all-encompassing point, would be more consulting services like the Tipperary Energy Agency. If we would have them in every big city, then we would be able to provide trust to end users. And then it's not about heat pumps, but it would be a solution for decarbonized heating systems and for an emission-free heating sector. I'm sure we have the technologies. Now I wish for process innovation and policy innovation that makes it real. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Very quickly, Paul, what would be your 3 wishes? Let's call them like that.
Oh, well, I think somebody should look into simplifying the rules. I see people playing with smoke and mirrors and rules and calling things heat pumps that aren't heat pumps, or getting around rules in certain ways. And it has always been thus since the launch of the whole building energy rating thing. So I'd love to see that it is getting better, and I'd just like to see that to simplify the path of the products, which have become very good. There's most manufacturers of a wide ranging offering of stuff. So I think if it can, the route to market can be simplified, people could have some more understanding of it by, as you say, as Mary said, when you stop 10 people in the street, most of them won't know what a heat pump is. So having maybe some sort of promotion, not brand focused, but just about the whole technology and what it can do. That would be nice to see more discussion in public on that. A third wish, I can't think of one right now, so I probably said too much.
It's quite okay, Paul. What about you, Mary? The same question.
Well, I've already identified, awareness raising, cost and skills, but there is one I would make a plea for. Excuse me. I had the pleasure to be working with the wind industry in Ireland, in the build-up to the government accepting a target of 70% renewable electricity by 2030. And this was an increase from 55% up to 70%. And part of the reason for that was that the industry itself opened their own plans so that it was possible for the industry association to put on the table an indication of the actual plans of the industry for development and rollout over the next 10 years. So that the government was confident that a higher level ambition could actually be achieved because they could see development plans for wind farms in Donegal or Kerry or wherever it might be, with timelines and volumes. I would really call on the heat pump industry in Ireland to do a similar exercise of planning the rollout of 600,000 heat pumps in Ireland. One small issue, we've had conversations with ESB networks, and they are concerned about the capacity in a string of 10 houses. You can put a heat pump in number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and by the time you get to 7, 8, 9, the power isn't there anymore. So it's not just a question of the market forces. It's a question of actually planning how you're going to deliver these products into the market in a non-competitive way, of course, but only the industry can do that. And if they don't do it, it will be very haphazard and much slower and more complicated in terms of rollout of the targets and the ambitions of the government. So my wish would be that the industry would sit down around the table and in a non-competitive way, plan out how 600,000 heat pumps can actually be delivered in the island of Ireland.
Thank you so much, Mary. Moving to Siona, the same question.
Yeah, no, similar, I think, to what Donna and Paul have said. I think definitely need to simplify the grant application. That would be the big thing. Obviously, a comment that you made, Thomas, about kind of Tipperary Energy Agency, kind of a replica. You don't even need a replica of Tipperary Energy Agency. There's building services, consultancy, engineers throughout the country working away. I think what we need to have is someone who has, you know, a professional title, who signs off to say, yes, this is a good application of a heat pump. It doesn't need to be an energy agency everywhere. There's plenty of skilled people out there that are able to do it. So yeah, I just think, you know, an independent consultancy doesn't, and the simplification of the grant would be the key things. I only 2 wishes.
That's okay. Thank you, Siona. What about you, Padraic?
Thanks, Anne. Very quickly, I suppose, just looking at the overall ambition for carbon neutral heating and cooling. So, you know, in the context of the RHC as well. My wish list would be that we have a plan which includes implementation and finance. Perhaps it looks at, as Thomas mentioned earlier, the massive EU funds that are available. Maybe we need to do some piloting of some of these following 3 things. First one is in large cities and towns where we have high density. Whether heat pumps in every house is the right answer, I'm not sure. Maybe we should be looking at district heating with heat pumps as maybe some pilots. Secondly, in smaller towns and villages, that we could look at really serious rollout of community energy schemes, including heat pumps, but also biomass, where it can be integrated into the local rural economies. And then finally, the third wish list would be that we have a really serious plan for recruiting and training the technical people, designers and installers. Because if we look at the targets, even if they're to be anyway achieved, we need to be installing over 50,000 heat pumps a year for the next 10 years. And we're miles away from that. So we need 1,000 heat pumps a week, you know, so 200 people a week working on heat pumps. So I don't think we have that at the moment. So there's my wish list. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Padraic. Laura?
Stop my video there to make sure I get through this as well. So my 3 wishes would be, firstly, as I mentioned, the countries that have done it well and got, you know, provided public funds to de-risk commercial finance providers, they at the time all pretty much used, you know, market their own funds. So they use national government funds purely. What's happened since is that the EU has developed specific financial instruments aimed at supporting either national level schemes or individual private finance providers. So the Smart Finance for Smart Buildings Guarantee Facility and the Private Finance for Energy Efficiency. I'd love to see an Irish, at a state level or at an institutional level, you know, some of those supports being used in 2021. The second wish is that we are seeing so much engagement from commercial finance providers, from the banks, the credit unions, on Post in Ireland, on energy efficiency finance. I just want to see them all doing more and getting really competitive with each other and accessing all of these public funds that are available to enable them to do more of what they are already starting to do. And they're already starting to engage with one-stop shops and other service providers in, you know, integrating that finance and technical support. And then the third thing, I suppose, third wish, is just that, you know, finance is only a small piece of the puzzle. The countries that do it well combine the low-cost finance with grants alongside, you know, communications campaigns, national ones, clear, actionable policy plans and frameworks and goals for renovation at a national level. And they also generally include that high energy performance standards unlock higher levels of grant support or higher levels of discount on the finance for the non-grant element. So I think that would be my fourth wish, that everything gets brought together at a national level with a view to seeing that, you know, this finance is just one element of the bigger picture.
Thank you so much, Laura. And lastly, Seamus.
Okay, I think most things have been mentioned. So the first wish is that we sort this COVID thing, so I don't have to be on another Zoom call for at least 4 years. The second wish is that we have more data. I think it's really important to say that heat pumps work, district heating systems work. We have lots and lots of systems out there that are performing really well, that Sheena has talked about, that Paul has talked about, that Padraic has talked about. There's a lack of data to back that up. You know, so we have gathered a lot of data through our super homes research and other research, but there's just not enough of that just to give further credence to the market that these technologies work. You know, we're not talking about space technology. They're proven commercial systems that work when they're installed properly. That would be the second. And I'm going to take 4 since some people only said 2. The other one would be to reiterate, I think, what other people said. I think we need to invest in people, in the designers, the engineers, the architects, and the installers. So we need to invest in those, because without those, the theory, those numbers that are written in the policy documents simply won't happen. The installations won't happen. I think, again, absolutely, there is a space for the network operators and the grid operators to absolutely step up. And I think part of the research agenda is to give them the data to show that actually some of the problems they think exist are not real problems, because some of their design standards are for the old world, not the new world. So that's a piece of work that needs to happen. And then I think the last piece that I would ask for is that, I think echoing what Mary said, is that we come together as a sector to kind of collectively drive this change, rather than it's been kind of a heat pump versus a PV versus a solar thermal versus another world. You know, that's not how the new world is going to operate. We're all in this to transition from the fossil world to the carbon neutral world, and if we don't work together, it won't happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that was such a good closing remark, I would say. Thank you so much for everyone, all the speakers, the attendees, my lovely team that put this together, the project, the RHC project, of course. All the attendees will receive a follow-up package via your email with the recording of the session, as well as some other bits of information. And I would really encourage you, because we have so many events coming up We had so many events before, and we have so many events coming up, especially now that, okay, there is COVID, but on the other side, online events are much easier to attend. To keep an eye on our social media, keep an eye on our newsletter, keep an eye on our website, and see what other events we have that we're busily planning for. Next national roundtable organized by EHPA will be on the country of Portugal, somewhere in March or April of 2021. Again, thank you again for attending. Thank you again for the massive interaction on our chat. And hope to see you in person or in another virtual event very soon. Thank you so much and have a lovely afternoon.
Bye-bye, everybody.